It would.
Okay.
Yeah, it would.
Honey, is that loader one of the pieces of equipment that had its life expectancy reduced because it was used in the dunes project?
It is, yes.
Yeah, that's, explain a little bit about how the salt water accelerated the deterioration of that equipment.
Well, we had, talking to staff, we have several pieces of equipment that the county owned that was used in the restoration of the dunes. In talking to staff, there was a challenge with trying to get companies that were willing to rent equipment to us. Therefore, they used some of the equipment we already had here in Flagler County. That dune project was approximately, duration was what, a year and a half, close to that, where you had equipment sitting on the beach daily. It did get periodic maintenance, it did get washed down, but anytime you've got steel with exposure to salt, it definitely diminishes its life cycle quickly. So that's an issue that we have with that loader. There are other pieces of equipment, but that's the most significant one right now that we have, so.
Corey, I understand we're live streaming now.
Oh,
Yeah, that piece of equipment's only gonna get worse fast, if it's not replaced, so bear that in mind.
So other than that, that's really all I have for Public Works Road and Bridge, unless you have any questions.
I got a couple of quick ones. The revenue dropped off about $500,000, and it appears that our reserves dropped even more than that. Can you explain what happened there?
Well, the revenues are tied to projects, billable hours that they had. So we do have about a $450,000 decrease there in projected staff time that would be billable on projects. A lot of that revenue that had come in, it was actually in fiscal year 19, which was the high year, was due to the impacts of hurricane damage and dune restoration work. We don't have anything anticipated on the horizon for them to have those projects where they're able to bill their hours. That's probably the most significant amount. And then the other one is naturally the interest. As you start cutting into your cash carried forward or your bank account, your interest is going to go down. Those were the two significant ones.
Okay.
So next up, we have transportation impact fees. I don't know if you'd like to go over those.
Yeah.
As you know, the county is in the process of implementing revised impact fees. Right now, there are only two impact fees that the county was collecting, and that was transportation and parks and rec. There had been a moratorium on the transportation impact fees. So when you're looking at this, you see really it's an overall decrease. That's primarily due to the non-collection and your interest in the bank. So.
And these are collected for new developments, folks that are.
This would be new. This would be new improvements that are made. They are separated out based on areas. This first one that we have is for it's the east, but it's the old east account. There might not be money being collected in that particular one because they've established a new east account. But these monies are used primarily by our engineering department, and it can be used towards new projects that they're doing. So it seems to be a general theme. If you go through, we've got several of these.
They're very low balance. Yeah.
Very low balance, and they are separated out by areas, whether it be east or west, and that money is used and stays in that area. If you've got any questions on that. on the impact
No,
fees?
just that the county is in the process of implementing, taking to the Board of County Commissioners a new study. It was a workshop this past Monday, and it was an introduction to that study. And we are planning to continue to move this forward. This will help increase the balances on specifically this one, transportation fee, and others. And that will probably, with all the growth that is taking place, would allow us to start building some capacity for new projects that are coming in, will be available for the public.
So next up, we have General Services Administration. This budget covers 5.75 FTEs. We've got a slight overall increase due to increase in personnel costs. But other than that, it's relatively a flat budget. The only increase that we had there was with primarily with personnel, with salaries and benefits. I don't know if anybody has any questions on that particular budget. Relatively small. Next up is our fleet management, and this is for 9.5 FTEs. We do, just for point of clarification, we do all of the vehicle repair for the county's fleet. We have interlocals with the city of Banel and Flagler Beach where they pay for whatever that direct cost is to them. We also have an interlocal with the sheriff's office to repair all of his vehicles. Primarily the increase here in this budget that you see is due to the increased cost of maintenance for the sheriff's vehicles. We took on the vehicle repair several years ago. We have not really had significant increases. However, over time, he has grown his fleet and added to it. So there is some increased costs here related to that.
I understand that next year we plan to break those costs out and represent them in his budget.
That's correct. We have had discussions where we were looking at, for transparency, taking some of those costs out that run through facilities and fleet within general services and putting those into the sheriff's budget. I think there's also some costs with the IT. I don't know if you did the budget yet, maybe yesterday, I think you did. So there's some costs there that probably need to be pulled out as well.
Yeah, the goal is to get a more accurate representation of exactly how funds are being spent, so that a person that's not familiar with county finances would be able to look at it and see exactly where tax dollars and other revenues are being applied.
Right. So if there are no questions with fleet, we can go on to facilities. So the facilities management budget, this is for 25.5 employees. This is related to all of your maintenance and construction for staff for county facilities. We maintain right around 1 million square feet of county facilities. And so you have a net decrease in the operating, and that's primarily due to the sale of the Sheriff's Operations Center. There are some costs in here that are directly related to the Sheriff's Office in the form of utilities, FPL, water, sewer, some of these maintenance costs that run through this account that will also be pulled out in this fiscal year and shown into the sheriff's budget. But overall, it's a net decrease though due to the sale of that Sheriff's Operations Center this year. So
It'll be going up next year or the year after, once the new sheriff's
correct.
building is up and running.
Correct. But that'll be at that point shown in the sheriff's budget.
Would you talk a little bit about the impacts of the deferred maintenance that we've done in order to bring a budget into balance in terms of your actual operating budget because of increased maintenance, and what the future impacts are going to be as you try to catch up on that deferred maintenance on our facilities.
Well, that's a good point. We've got a lot of deferred maintenance items that are not shown actually in the facilities budget. They're rolled up in our capital improvement plan, which we're going to talk about a little bit later. But we do have preservation items in parks and in facilities that have been deferred year after year, and it's compounded the CIP plan that we have.
And that impacts your actual operating budget.
It does.
Because of that equipment fails more often, or those facilities fail more often.
You run into unanticipated emergencies that now get to the point that you need to address.
Find the right way, yeah.
Yeah. So if we have, I don't know if anybody has any questions on this one, on the facilities. Mike, you're so quiet. Chime in at any time.
They don't fight. You told me you were going to give a speech, but.
That's at the end.
That's at the end. Thanks, Wade.
The next one I had, and I don't know if it's, if you guys have it, is the GSB fund.
Yep.
It falls under.
Yep.
Falls under facilities, but it is for the government services building. There are no employees attached to this budget. This is really to capture the costs for maintenance and operation of the government services building, this building. And this is a shared cost. We do bill the school board for their appropriate share. During construction, it's about 44.2% of the building. Therefore, whatever the operating costs and expenses are, we bill them quarterly for that. So they're paying their fair share of this, but this is more or less just the budget to capture those costs. And again, they are shared with the school board. So this is not completely borne by the Board of County Commission. We do have a slight reduction, and that is due to non-billable work orders being used. Those non-billable work orders primarily are related to the board side. A lot of the work that we do is, there are some shared expenses with some common areas, but they are billed for those. So we do capture those, but this portion is for the board side of non-billable work orders being utilized. So more or less it was a wash. You're taking it from one fund and putting it into another general fund. It's a little redundant. So
So they're not here because of that, they're actually accounted for in a different fund, the 120.
what was happening was we were creating work orders and showing the work. There was a switch made to make them non-billable. It's really just for tracking purposes. So it was eliminated because what we saw before was you would take money out of this fund, which is a general fund account, and you would just move it into facilities, which was another general fund account. It's a little redundant, not necessary, so.
I see elevator repairs.
That's it.
Are we anticipating a replacement plan on those?
We have reached out to the vendor to get a cost of doing a replacement schedule. It probably will not be all 3 elevators at once, but we do anticipate having some of those repairs next year. So we did increase that.
Well, you understand that's one that I'm especially sensitive to.
Yes, we're starting with the freight elevator in the back.
Yeah, since I got stuck in there.
Yes, so we do anticipate doing that next year. So overall, though, it's a decrease in this budget.
That was a quick way to get that on the capital replacement.
It was not intentional.
I'm not convinced.
So in order, do you have Princess Place or public transportation?
Oh,
Princess Place.
Princess
yeah.
Place,
This is
Eco
Beachfront,
Cottages, okay. This is really, it was set up for the cottages, the 3 eco cottages that we have up at Princess Place. This budget is really the cost of half of an FTE associated with taking that additional work on. it's relatively flat budget. We do have a lot of, I don't know that we talked about the revenues here, but we do have, the cottages that we have are highly utilized. They're booked a couple months out in advance. They've been really well received by the community and the tourists to Flagler County.
So these expenditures are completely offset by the revenues coming in?
Yes.
Okay, so these are not hitting general fund at all?
No,
Okay,
we don't show the revenues here, but it's,
they're offset.
they are offset, yes. If we've got any questions there. Public transportation, this is the budget that supports our public transportation, our paratransit, door-to-door service. It's a slight, you have a slight increase in your personnel costs, but you've got a decrease in your operating, and that's primarily due to the TDP, or the Transportation Development Plan update. It's a cyclical plan update that's required by FDOT and by the Commission for Transportation Disadvantage. It's not due, so you have a reduction there in your operating. So overall, it's a very slight increase. You see that theme there with the radio user fees, that's new. Those offset the new radio system. And then we've got some software maintenance agreement increases slight,
Okay.
but overall relatively flat public transportation. Do you talk about the grants next? So we've got the 5310 grant. This is something that we apply for annually. The grant does have a local match. This particular grant is used for capital equipment, so it'll be used to replace some of our vehicles. We've got anticipated to replace 5 minibuses. Again, it's a 90% funded grant with a 10% match coming from the board. So although the budget shows the $364,000, it's really roughly a $36,000 cost to the county.
And they're expected to be replaced this coming year?
Yes. Next up, we have recreation facilities. So this is the budget associated with maintaining all of the county parks. We do break out some of the, like Princess Place, Bull Creek, the cottages, things like that, but this is primarily for all of our county parks. We have a slight increase in personnel costs and a slight increase in the operating. A lot of that has to do with historical figures on the cost of maintaining building and equipment repairs. Again, that kind of goes hand in hand with some of our deferred maintenance. So when you defer the repair on a lot of these things, you start seeing these annual maintenance costs building up over time.
With this budget of 2.2 million, how many parks do you maintain for the county?
We have a total of 28 parks and preserves.
28 parks.
Bull Creek is broken out of that, and Princess Place is broken out, so this budget would be 26. 26 total. We have 28 total, but 26 maintained out of this one. We recently added one. We had Bay Drive Park, which was new last year, I believe. Time flies, it might be 2 years.
And these are the proposed equipments you're planning to replace this year?
This is, yeah. A lot of the equipment had been deferred last year. Parks and Recreation didn't get any equipment. So by deferring it, we see these costs here. There is also what runs through this account is an aid or a contribution to the school board. So in the county's Parks and Recreation budget, you'll see the request for $169,000. That's to offset the staff time and the expenses borne by the school board to operate the Flagler Youth Center that is located at the FPC high school campus. So they bill us quarterly reimbursement based on their staffing and their operating costs there. They maintain the building, but we provide the staffing, so they bill us for the staffing. So
Okay.
that's what that is there.
Going back to that staffing, what is some of the work that the staffing is doing, the work the board is paying for? Do you know what they're doing?
The staffing at the school board, they run the program, it's 5 days a week. It runs right after high school, once school ends. I believe they also have a summer program that's open Monday through Friday. They have a lot of different activities. They've got some tutoring, they've got peer counseling. It's a place for the students to be able to go, have a safe environment, access to computers, video games. Again, peer mentoring, counseling through some of the school board staff. It's similar to the program that they run at Carver, but it's done at the school campus there. So.
Thank you.
Let me know if you have no special registration. So vessel registration is basically the tax or the money collected through people registering their boats. This money can only be used for certain restricted items. We have used this money in the past to maintain all of our boat launches. So we've used it as a grant match on some of the find projects where we've gone in and done the whether it be dredging of the boat basin, installation of floating docks, channel markers, anything that supports boating activities. So this money here is collected. We show it's an overall decrease. We don't have any anticipated projects, but again, this money has been used for grant matches. So like where you'll see in fiscal year 21 or the current year, we've got 115,000 allocated as an expense. We don't really have anything in capital anticipated for next year. We typically carry about 25 to 30,000 for operating expenses of more like your channel markers, if we've got pylons that need to be replaced, things like that, more of the day-to-day operational things that need to be done there. But that's what that is. It's not tax dollars necessarily. It comes from people registering their boats.
Are you expecting to use that 115 this year, or there'll be some left over for next year?
It'll stay in the account. We don't anticipate. So I don't know if she's got, if they have a roll up, probably it's not shown here, but that money will stay in the fund.
We're just showing it in reserves.
Yeah, it'll show in reserves. Next up, we have Carver. Carver, like I said, it's a similar program to what they run at the Flagler County Youth Center at FPC. Again, this is an interlocal agreement that we have with the school board. The county, the difference with the youth center, the county built the youth center on the school board property. However, the school board maintains it. They staff it, we pay for the staffing. At the Carver Center, it's a county-owned facility, therefore we bear the cost of the day-to-day operation. So you'll see that utility expense has gone up slightly in this budget. That's really what the increase is here. And then again, that grants and aids contribution at $97,500. That's for the cost to pay the school staff that's there running and operating that project there. So it's a slight increase, but primarily due to increase in utility expense.
And the expansion for this project will be later covered through the CIP.
It'll be covered through the CIP for the expansion, and some of those operating costs won't be reflected in this budget. It'll be reflected in next year's budget. We're actually, Mike shared with me, we actually have guys out there this morning to start prepping and getting ready to start that project. We are having a little struggle, a little challenge with getting some concrete and block work done, but it is moving forward, so. Next up is Bull Creek. Okay. This is one of our 28 parks. It is separated out. This is Bull Creek Fish Camp is on the west side of Flagler County. We do have an RV campground and a concessionaire that runs a restaurant out there. Pretty much flat budget. Again, slight increase in utility expenses, slight increase in personnel costs, but overall relatively flat. And I'd have to look at the revenue on this one. This is usually rented, I'd say, October, November through March or April. It does offset the cost of doing this. So we are making money through the RV campground and the concessionaire out there that even though this is shown in the general fund, it's not really a cost to the community because it is offsetting revenue for that, so. Next up is Princess Place. So Princess Place Preserve, I know you've been out there. This is it's my favorite park that we have, but this budget is for the operation and maintenance of Princess Place Preserve, which is approximately 1,600 acres. This budget is for 3.5 FTEs that are responsible for the maintenance and upkeep of those 1,600 acres. It's a relatively flat budget. We do have some slight increased costs in personnel. It is a preserve, so we do anticipate some additional costs with the tree or stump removal. And that's again based on some historical information that we have. And if you've been up there, you can see all the trees, and some of those are in areas of historic buildings and things like that. It's not something that we take on that liability. We'll hire somebody to do that. So we do anticipate an increase there for that, as well as some small tools and equipment, things that are used on the property up there. Overall, though, it's a very minor increase there.
This also has a few capital projects that we're going to be considering as well.
That's right, correct. Yeah. And this one also has some revenue. We do rent out the fields and pavilions up at Princess Place, as well as we have some primitive and equestrian camping up there. So there is some offsetting costs here to this daily operation as well. Park impact fees. Again, we touched on impact fees previously. Parks is one of the ones that we are collecting. However, they are significantly less than what we anticipate collecting in the future. The thing with the impact fees, again, it is dedicated to certain zones. So wherever you're seeing growth in a certain area within Flagler County, that money is staying to improve parks and facilities within that district or that area. So they are set up in zones.
Can you just to the public outline where those zones are approximately?
I probably need to defer to, I don't have the map in front of me.
Not in there.
It's not in here.
So
Is it-
zone 1, I think, is Wadsworth Park East.
East.
Are they the same as the transportation?
No, they're different.
Because I saw this.
Yeah.
4, I think, is the west side. I think divided by US 1.
US 1, correct.
I can tell you.
We have a map in the budget book.
The adopted book has it.
Yeah, I don't have it here as part of this.
saying Wadsworth and Hammock are in zone one. Is that true?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't have that with me, so. And looking at it, based on the expenses, though, zone one does cover Wadsworth and Hammock.
Right.
And then if you look at,
So
zone two, doesn't show any historical information. Zone three included Moody Homestead playground equipment, which was here on 100, closer to Banel, right outside of Palm Coast. And zone four, I believe, is the west side because we used it for playground equipment replacement at Pellisier and Hidden Trails. So zone four is the west side.
These impact fees are really low compared to the demands for recreation that y'all receive.
It is, yeah, it's significantly low, a lot lower than what we anticipate collecting in the future. We do have some expenses coming out of zone one next year, though. We are going to look to replace the court lighting that you have at Wadsworth and install some hammock pickleball court lighting in zone one. I think that's what we're showing right now.
But there's a big demand for things like
Pickleball.
pickleball courts that we just don't have the impact fees to cover.
Correct. Right now, I mean, for future, we've got about 168,000 in reserves in that fund that could be used for pickleball at the hammock. But I know that there's a dueling request for courts, additional courts, not just at the hammock community center where we built 3 existing. There's a desire to put 3 more up there, but there's also a request that had been made by the community to install 4 new courts at Wadsworth. We typically don't have any at Wadsworth right now. We do have 3 tennis courts that we allow them to utilize now, but it's not really a permanent solution. There is a lot of use of those courts by tennis players at Wadsworth Park. So.
Do we have enough in zone 1 to do the community center up at the hammock?
You are probably about $80,000 short.
Pretty close.
We're anticipating those new courts at the hammock. If we added 3 courts, we have 3 existing. We were looking at not only installing 3 additional courts, putting in a pavilion, giving them an area that they could have shade while they're waiting for their game to start. We also would do some tie-in to sidewalk and additional parking. So we're anticipating material cost at about $250,000. Right now, we've got about $168,000 in this fund. So we're short, roughly give or take, around $80,000.
These could potentially be phased out where when the parks impact fees get implemented again, we can start collecting and then do the second part.
Yeah, that's what
Later
I
on.
was saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we'll probably be able to do both once the park impact fees get implemented.
Yeah. I agree with that.
I don't know if, John, I'd have to check on the legality. I don't know if anticipating future impact fees for parks that we could do an interfund loan to be paid back. for impact fees.
It's possible. Yeah, once they implement the new ones coming up, yeah.
That may be a solution for you, Heidi.
Okay.
It depends on what the board does with the impact fees, but if we put those in place, it's easy to anticipate the revenues. So you'd be able to accomplish it sooner that way.
Okay, great. So next up is zone 2. We don't have anything anticipated in zone 2 to be spent. Right now, we have less than $30,000 sitting out there for future. So we don't anticipate spending that. It's really not enough to do anything yet. Moving on to Zone 3. We don't have anything identified. We're currently right around $147,000. And again, we'll have to go back and look when we get to our CIP if there's any projects that qualify in that zone that we might be able to utilize or move up some of those projects. I know it most recently had been used at Moody Homestead. I don't know if this covers Old Dixie Park or not. I'm just thinking of another location where we potentially have a need for some improvement.
Hey, Heidi, can you please cover the relationship between implementing new capital projects like this and demand on staff services
For which particular project?
for any of the capital projects like these parks? Because we have some capital funding in some of those, but we have not added any new parks.
Right, our most recent park that we added to our inventory was Bay Drive Park, but we have not grown our staff to accommodate the addition for this growth. The county back in the downturn, I want to say it was 2008, 2007, 2008, Flagler County had done a reduction through layoffs to work within our means. General services was the hardest hit department within the Board of County Commission. It is the largest department, therefore naturally it would be the most impacted, but we have not gone back to those staffing levels that we had prior to the downturn in economy. But we have not reduced, we've actually increased our facilities, not just our parks, but also our buildings. And we have not grown back to that level. So as we take on additional activities or additional expansions, there's going to be a direct correlation to having our operating increase, whether it be through utilities, maintenance, or staffing to get to that. So as we look at putting on new projects, we need to take that into account. So. That brings us, I think, we did go over Zone 4. Again, this one is the same story. We've got roughly about $76,000 sitting out there. We've used this to purchase for playground equipment, things like that. And again, we can go back and look at our CIP and see if there's anything here that this might be able to defer some of those costs on. It's really not a lot of money, so might not be enough. Utility Regulatory Authority. So this fund came to be back in 1996 when the county had enacted an ordinance creating the Flagler County Utility Regulatory. It was an interim authority. I think that we probably need to look to legal. I'm not sure if this is something that needs to stay on the books. As we are no longer in the utility business, this is probably something that could conceivably go away. We have not used this fund. I can't remember the last time. I want to say it might have been in 2005, 2006. We did have outside consultant that had done some utility work for the county. There was some cost going through that, but I think this probably needs to be looked at by the county attorney as potentially dissolving this fund. So that brings up the Old Kings Road landfill. We do not have any open active landfills in Flagler County. We do have a household hazardous waste collection site out on Old Kings that we do operate that's free of cost to the residents. They take things such as, paint, fertilizer, pesticides. They'll take tires. There are limited quantities on what you can drop off. But we do operate that. It's free of charge to county residents. It's open Monday through Friday, 7 to 3:30. We do, even though we do not have any open active landfills, the county does have an obligation for monitoring. So some of the sites, we still have monitoring wells. but we have to provide for the long-term care and maintenance of the facilities until such time that DEP deems that they're no longer in need of monitoring. So a lot of these were not really collecting revenues. In this particular one, the Old Kings Road grant, or Old Kings Road landfill, we did receive a grant. We are no longer receiving a grant in this fund. There is some cash carry forward in here. The only expenses related to this fund are really for the professional services. That's your outside engineering firm that does some of the monitoring of the site.
How about the FTEs that are there collecting this?
They're out of a different fund. I think we'll probably see several funds. This first one is the 145. It's primarily used to offset some of the miscellaneous engineering services. We budget for the worst, anticipating, if they had to come out and do a whole site assessment review. So we budget the 50. You can see historically, it's really only cost roughly under 20,000 a year. So that's what this particular fund is used for here. Then you'll go to the next one, which is your C&D, which is also out on Old Kings Road. A lot of these are same story. It's very stagnant. It's really providing for the long-term care. The costs that we see here are related to your outside engineering firm. Currently, I believe we're using HDR. Brad Stone is the engineer that does the monitoring and does a lot of the reporting to us through DEP. Primarily, there's really not much movement here. It's held in reserves largely. That brings us to the Banel Landfill, which is actually right at the approach of runway, I don't know if it's 629 or main taxiway there. It's an old landfill. It's across the street from Target on the south side of 100. You wouldn't even know it's there. It's been gone. It used to be, I think, more of a transfer or burn site. Burn site where there's nothing really buried there, but we do have some money in reserves. This site had been released by the state. It's no longer required for monitoring. So we do have some money there in case there's costs, repair to fencing or anything needed there, but had been released by the state.
And these funds that we have in reserves and in each of these line items that you presented, that are special revenues, can only be used for those particular items.
Correct.
They can't be shared across any other fund.
Correct. These particular ones are that way. That brings us to the next budget, which is our solid waste landfill. This is where you have the 2.5 employees that are assigned that do the household hazardous waste. You have 2 employees that are assigned there, and it also pays for half of a position that does the financials. There is a full cost accounting that needs to be done annually, advertised, and handled through the state. So they're the ones that more or less do that. There is one thing to note is there is a reduction in the revenue because as the county grows, we are no longer considered a small rural county. Our population has increased, so we no longer qualify for that solid waste management grant. So that's a reduction in our revenues for next year. So you'll start to see our cash carry forward will start decreasing here.
Seems like 3 years left. Oh.
On this particular one. And this site, the site that they're out on is on Old Kings. It's getting close to not having to be monitored. The latest that I remember, there was, I think, 1 or 2 monitoring wells that had to be moved across the street on Old Kings, east, I think southeast, or that they were monitoring some of the underwater contaminants that might be moving. But this is one of the facilities that's probably close to no longer needing to be monitored, so. We do need to mow it and still need to provide maintenance to the facility. Again, this primarily, this budget here is related to the household hazardous waste collection site, which is free to the county residents. It may come a time that we need to, revisit that and maybe potentially assess a charge for some of these items.
Yeah, we'll need to have some revenue coming in to pay for those
To pay
folks
for the,
out there.
yeah. So that is something
That's
we
why
need
my
to look
brow
at.
was furrowed, in case anyone was wondering.
Yeah.
I was like, wait a minute.
And there is potential for an offsetting revenue source, which I think we'll probably go into next. It's not related to the landfill particularly, but you do have a potential for your residential solid waste collection, which does generate profit. We do get,
So just real quick on the previous fund, that was being carried and the people were being paid for because we were getting a state fund, a grant from the state because we're a small county.
correct,
Now we're growing, like we've been saying, for a year or so, and we're no longer eligible for that grant, so we don't have that revenue coming in.
correct.
So this is an enterprise fund, so it's either needs to be sustained on its own or something else needs to be done. So we'll just have to in the future have discussions on what we're going to do with that fund. So we may need to start charging, or if we're going to keep
Look
it
at
free.
alternatives.
Yeah, yeah. That's something in the relatively near future we'll have to address.
Correct. So that brings us up to our residential solid waste collection. This is the county has a mandatory ordinance in place for solid waste collection in the unincorporated areas. If you have improved property with a home on it, from the time that structure receives a CO, it's a mandatory, you have to pay for solid waste collection. This is done through a third party. We currently have a contract with Waste Pro in the unincorporated areas. So this revenue and expenses is primarily what that is. So we do generate a franchise fee that comes back to the county. It's 10%. It is used to offset the cost of staff time. This is something that potentially could be used as an offset for the landfill. Potentially, it's got running through this fund, the 405 fund, we've got 1.75, almost 2 employees that handle the accounting of the billing, as well as the management of customer complaints, issues related to our third-party contractor that does the work. If you look at it, we do have an increase in the revenues. That's primarily with new customers coming on board. As we grow, we're continuing to collect those revenues. Overall, in the operating side of it, it's relatively stagnant. It's not much of an increase.
So the billing of the charges to the folks in the unincorporated area, is that line item there 40-01? Is it 45,000 a year?
No,
That's not it.
no, it's the 40-03, the solid waste collection charges.
Oh, the 1.5.
The 1.7 million that's anticipated for next year. That is done, it's a good point that you brought that up, because the 1.7 million is actually what's collected through our tax collector.
Okay.
What happens is when the buildings get a CO and we're putting together our list, our notification to go out for our trim notice, the tax anticipation note that goes out to the residents, you may have some houses that are under construction where they haven't gotten a CO. So that $45,000 that you see in line 4001, that's internal billing that we do to those customers until we can get them onto the tax roll. So you'll see 2 coming in. So primarily the bulk of it comes from tax collector as the 1.7. 45,000 is what we anticipate to do as internal billings. We are looking at alternatives though to get away from billing. And instead of doing quarterly billing, which typically we take on maybe anywhere from 70 to 100 customers a year. It is it's not labor intensive, but it is time consuming. What we were looking at potentially doing and getting away from doing the billing quarterly is requiring them to pay that at the time of CO. So possibly maybe going back to the board, creating a new ordinance, having that money collected through the building department or potentially through general services, but maybe a slip or some sort of notification needs to be made to the building department that, hey, I've paid my fees, so that we're collecting it and at the time of CO. Because what happens now, we're doing quarterly billing, and we're anticipating they're going to pay, but if they don't pay, you may miss some of the revenue. You're probably not going to put a lien on somebody's house for $200 of collection of garbage. So, when you outweigh the cost benefit there, I think it's probably more prudent to do it collected at the time of CO, and that way you're collecting the full amount at that time. So that is something that we're looking at changing the way we're doing that. So.
There seems to be a relationship between those billed new accounts that are not part of it yet, 45,000, 43,000, and then an increase that takes place at the line item where it's collected of 47,000. So that seems like that's the normal growth.
It seems to be, yeah.
Adding customers.
Yeah, and again, this is just for the unincorporated areas. So as we see that growth, we're adjusting it there, but relatively flat. Just increasing our reserves that we have on the books. And some of that reserves that sits on the books, I believe, is that for the 1 quarter of rollover into the fiscal year? I don't know if that is, or is that the 1.2 million still sitting out there that can be used?
That's the other one.
That's the other one, okay.
What other uses can these funds be used for?
This is not restricted.
Not restricted, so the board can decide to move this money to funds.
They could, and in the past, we have pulled it out, not all of it, but I think we've used it to offset some of the costs during the downturn. I don't remember, roughly maybe 500,000. I think in chunks of 500,000, we've pulled it down, but it is not restricted. This comes to us because we are, it's a franchise fee agreement that we have with the waste hauler where we collect 10%. Again, it's intended to offset some of the costs of operating this program, which is the almost 2 FTEs. But there are, it has built up over the years, and we haven't really touched it much. So there is money there that potentially could be used as a one-time fix, maybe to offset some of our capital CIP or something like that. Preservation of county facilities. So. And next up, Hazardous tourism. So I have more in my book, but I think that's for this afternoon.
You're on a roll, you can, anyway, let you go.
Anything else, Heidi?
No, I don't think so. We'll be back for CIP and our rolling stock this afternoon, or actually a little later.
About an hour or so.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, thank you, Heidi. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Mike's the quiet one.
Good input, Mike. Good input.
Yeah. Good speech, Mike.
Well, thank you, guys.
It's mine or yours? It's mine.
That's it. Thanks, Ed.
Yep, thank you.
Next up is Director Amy Lukasik for Tourist Development.
Okay, you're up. You're up.
Are you just gonna do that?
Hi, Amy.
Good morning.
Welcome, Amy.
Thank you. All right.
You're ready. Just get right into it if you like.
Yeah, so first I'm just going to review a couple items before we get into the actual budget, and then I'm going to start with Fund 110, and then I'll do 109 and then 111. Keep things going. So I just wanted to first talk about our revenues and where we're at, and also how funds are divided into all the different buckets.
And so Fund 110 is your operating
Yes.
fund that has 3 pennies.
3
going in it.
pennies, yep. So this year so far, we have collected close to 1.6 million. And obviously we had projected around this time last year, even earlier, that we would do 2 million because we didn't know what was going to happen. So the good news is we are definitely on track to far exceed that. And just to give you a little bit of a comparison, what I did is I went back and looked at our highest year of revenue collections, which was fiscal year 2018. We collected 2.770. So then what I did is I said, okay, well, let me see at this time in 2018, where were we in revenues? And we are currently up $219,000 from this time of 2018, our current, okay.
Yeah, correct.
Yes, so that just to give you a little bit of an idea of where we're trending, there's a lot of reasons for that uptick in revenues. So with that said, what I have taken is that information, plus yesterday I got a sneak peek into what the following month will look like. And again, it is, we collected just in hotels and in the resort, we collected 3.4 million in revenue, not that tax revenue. The month prior was 3.8. So we still have two of our largest collection months coming up, July and then June. So July historically has been usually either our first or second largest month.
Is that a trend statewide, or is that
No.
just Flagler counties
It's our trend.
doing better?
It tends to be regional, but like down south, they're opposite of us because they have so many snowbirds.
Right.
So where we're slower, we still have snowbirds, but nowhere near to
Is
us.
everyone else across state though higher in the revenue like we are this time of
Right
year?
now, yes, yes.
Okay, good.
Central Florida, things are looking better, but the beach communities are the ones that are really, yes. So what I've done is taken all that kind of analysis and the industry webinars and information that we are privy to, and I am projecting that we will be able to do 3 million for fiscal year 22, and I'm really, really hoping that we will get very close to it this year. But with that said, so that 3 million then, just for those who may need a reminder, don't know, we then divide those revenues into 3 buckets. So as John said, 3 pennies, 60% goes to our operating budget, which is Fund 110. And then Fund 109 is our capital projects. And they get 20%, 1 penny. And Fund 111, same thing, 1 penny, 20%. So if you take $3 million, Fund 110 then would be distributed with 1.8 million of that. So now I'm ready to jump into 110. So the first thing to note under our operating is an increase in professional services. So what we have budgeted additional this year is we want to do, well, one of the things we want to do, I may be able to do in this year's budget, which we want to get a professional rendering for future experience center. So we budgeted 15,000 for that, and then we budgeted 15,000 for Starry Nights, which is our commitment to that event in Flagler Beach. So one of the things in our strategic plan, we're not going to be event organizers or creators. It's a lot of work. So instead, what the outcome was instead, we would identify maybe 4 events a year more specifically during the slower time. So this is obviously a slow time, December and January. And we would help support events that were already going to happen. And that could look different ways depending what the event is. So this is one that we've committed to, and last year we were able to pull it off relatively quickly in 8 weeks, and it was a huge success. And I think it has a lot of legs, and we've already have met as a committee a couple times, so that we can now have more time to plan. We're going to put out an RFP so that we can get a professional company to come out and light the pier and the A-frame. So that is the difference in that account. So then moving on, another one is the commission fees for the tax collector. So by state statute, they get 3%. So that's more revenue, more tax collector. So that's the reason for that. So the 54,000 is based upon collecting 1.8 million, not 1.4. So that one is ready to move forward, upward and onward. So then kind of the next one is our rent. We have a great increase in rent, so that's 50,000 versus 47,300. The next account, maintenance and agreements. What was added this year was part of that transparency is DEX imaging. IT let us know we need to budget for that, for our copier, and also hosting a webcam. So there is a beach webcam that we do not own or operate. It was already there. It looks out onto the pier. It's time and time again one of our most visited pages on our website, especially when there's a natural disaster. So we have partnered with the person who owns it, and we have agreed to pay for the cost of that. So her hosting costs are like $720 a year. So we agreed to that. So that's the cost that falls under maintenance agreements. Then when you move further down to special event overnight stay grants, it says 80,000. And then the one below it, regional drive market, it's 0. So what we've done differently this year is, in the past, there were 2 different types of grants that local organizations could apply for. Now what we did is we just combined them and made one grant. So where before it was divided up, usually the overnight stay would get 70-something thousand, and then that regional drive market would get 22,000. Now we just combine them and just so that's why there's just one line item now for that grant. Fireworks, City of Flagler Beach and City of Palm Coast. We continue to commit to that.
That's 25,000 there, fireworks.
Yeah, City of Flagler Beach gets 25, Palm Coast gets 20. And that recently increased, probably 3 years ago.
What is it? Where is that money going to go, since they are actually not doing fireworks?
Yeah. I have a couple ideas. One of them is the offsetting the renderings and professional architecture for the Experience Center. I'm waiting till after July 4th, just to.
Anything can happen.
Anything can happen. So I've not yet committed to anything. So then on the next page, the next biggest line item difference, is advertising. So this year we have budgeted 550,000. Now that we're coming out of COVID, we went back up to the 600,000.
What is the data processing software cost there? What is that for?
It's probably our website.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so it's a service called Crowdrisk, and that was 15,300. That's a a 3-year agreement. I believe we're on year 3. So what Crowdrisk allows us to do is gather photos that people post online of our community. So it's an algorithm type of thing. You could probably understand it better than I could, but when people post on social media, it captures it via a location or a hashtag. So we can't be everywhere taking photos. And as you know, people take a lot of times fantastic photos, especially with the quality of phones now. So what we do is when we see a photo that we like, so we're able to go in the back end and we're able to see all the photos. Then when there's ones that we like, we send them a message saying, oh, what a great photo of your dinner at Oceanside. We'd like to use it for promotional materials and advertising. If you agree, reply with hashtag yes to Flagler. And when they do that, that then allows us to use that.
No cost,
No cost.
To be clear, this is not like going into people's phone and getting their photos. These are people posting on their social media and making it available and you request it.
Public, right. We're not able to capture it. My account is private, so even if I hashtag visit Flagler, it still would not show up. And it's by location too, so even if people don't know our hashtags or anything like that, we still can see it based on location.
But it's a process that the person initiates by posting on the social media. So I just want to know, like,
Right,
we're
no
accessing
big
the
brother,
friends,
no. And a lot of times this is good for the person posting it because it gives them more exposure. And if they're trying to grow their followers and be an influencer, which we see a lot up at the Hammock Beach Resort, a lot. There's a lot of Instagram influencers up there. And that's really, I mean, myself and a lot of other people who plan our vacation just using hashtags and location in Instagram. You can plan your whole vacation that way now. So it's a great tool for us because we always were sparse on photography. So it definitely just, and people like to see the real people instead of the models. So a lot of communities now are using them. And when you go to our website, we have Crowdrisk galleries. So we just recently did a post during Bike Week with bikes, burgers, and brews or something. So we were able to create the Crowdrisk gallery of all the photos that people were posting. And then we also have the ability to have it as a call to action. So say there's a photo of someone at a restaurant, you can click on the photo and it'll take you to the restaurant's website. So it's multi-purpose. All right. Any other questions for Fund 110? I will say for the record, one of the things that we're currently working on is creating or helping us facilitate an official county designated arts, historic, and cultural council. And we had a first meeting with all those individuals and asked them if they were still interested in pursuing that. We've been doing a lot of research on how other counties are set up. We've talked to the state of cultural affairs to get their insight. And we're getting ready to have our second meeting next week. Some folks have raised their hands saying they're interested in volunteering to help get this set up. So, and this was as a result of the strategic plan as well. The organizations felt there needs to be a neutral party that takes the lead. And you have to be designated the official county local arts agency, and that allows for state funding. So right now, even though there may be 3 or 4 local organizations that have the designation of an LAA, local arts agency, it does not allow them to apply for certain type of funding. So that is the goal, is to get that in place. Now, we want to show the group that we're willing to put our money where our mouth is. So what we would propose is we would dedicate a certain amount of funding for a certain amount of time to then go back and assess and see our return on investment until they can get up and running on their own. So that's kind of where we're at now. And if that does come to fruition, I have a few ideas how within this current budget, we wouldn't have to add, how we could do that. But I just want to say for the record that that is something we are currently working on. Questions on
I know you touched about on the grants, but there's some items that you share with us on the strategic plan that talk about some projects that folks can apply for. Which line item covers that?
Well, if it's like a capital project,
Yeah.
that'll come on
The
the
others,
next.
okay.
The grants under this fund are events.
Events.
Yeah, so if they want to put on
Advertising
a
events.
barbecue event, yeah, this is to help offset the costs of
Marketing.
advertising and marketing the event outside of the county
Mhm.
and to help offset any printing of their flyers, posters. All right, so now we'll go to 109. And this is the capital project. So again, anticipating we'll be able to do 3 million. This fund would have 600,000 in revenue. And what's good about our department, which we have seen through hurricanes and the pandemic, we're able to be nimble very quickly. So in the event we do, knock on wood, have a hurricane or anything, we're able to quickly adjust. So for capital projects, 18,000 for the tax collector fee. That's based on collecting 600,000. So that obviously fluctuates. That's a mandatory 3% that goes to the tax collector. The other things to note is where it says Flagler County Parks. So even though there's nothing that's planned on being spent, just to note for the record, there is a long-standing amount of funding, $28,370, that is to be used. There was a grant that the county had received and it was placed in the tourism fund, and it is to be used only for exhibits out at Princess Place. I believe the grant, this is before my time even, so it's been sitting here for over 10 years. When they received the grant was more than that, but they have spent some of it, and that's the remaining balance. So, I think this is something in our world, destination development, we would like to partner with the appropriate person in parks to use those funds but it can only be used at Princess Place and for like exhibits.
Oh, exhibits, no capital, like fixing a roof over there, a building, does that cover?
I do not believe so, yeah. And Al and Heidi are the most dialed into that grant that they received, so that's something to keep note of.
So the reason is down to zero is because you're anticipating that it'll be used this year.
That it won't be used, so, but it's there. So then, moving further down to where it says the Florida Agricultural Museum, City of Flyway Beach, Pier, and the Town of Marineland. Those also have, right now, zero. So, but I just wanted to make note. So 150,000 is available to the Florida Ag Museum for restrooms and I think exhibits as well. They still go through the process of a capital project application, right? They still go through the application. This isn't something where they send us a bill and then we cut them a check. We recently revised the capital project program. They are grandfathered into the old process. So now we have scoring, whereas before we didn't. So they still would just fill out the application, give a presentation to the TDC. Once that's approved, yeah. So they're kind of outstanding anomaly from everyone else.
So if it's available, why is it not in the tentative budget for next year?
Good question.
Our budgeting process is we expect everything will be spent. If it needs to roll, it would happen during the carry forward process. That way we're not double and triple budgeting something every year, inflating our budgets.
Well,
It's not an
it
ongoing.
would be inflating it because you have an initiative going on at the Ag Museum. That if we aren't showing support, we're not going to be able to get some support and sponsors from other places. So that's probably a mistake.
Well, that's what reserves are for too. If the board's action was to invest in the agriculture.
If it's an ongoing commitment of $150,000 every year, that's how you would
No.
show it.
One time.
It's a one-time
Yeah.
thing, so we wouldn't want to budget that every year. We would, in the carry forward process, that will be carried forward into that line item. So it's not going away. It's just not being re-budgeted.
The only thing is that the way it's read, somebody that's reading it
Yeah,
sees that
right.
we're spending it this year. It's not available this year.
But they
Well,
could,
this is,
in theory, too.
it's budget though, it's the way we do budget.
I would see it rolling forward in the reserves, but being budgeted again for next year, an additional 150.
It will be part of the amended budget, not the adopted budget. So this, if they spent no money here, we rolled it forward, it would show $150,000 in the amended budget.
But it's the same 150,000,
It is.
but that's not where we need to be going.
If it's a one-time thing, it's a continuing obligation of $150,000 a year, that's how we would show it in the adopted budget each year. It's a similar thing what we do with the capital projects. We wouldn't budget a capital project in year one and continue budgeting that in year two and year three if that project continues. We would show that as a carry forward in the adjusted budget.
I'll have a chat with you offline on that. because
Okay.
I don't think that puts us where we need to go.
Okay.
And then the next line item under that, the city of Flagler Beach Pier for 150, they have already spent $90,435 for phase one, which was paid November of 2020. So they have a balance of $59,565 that's available to them, which has already been approved. They just have to submit their reimbursement. They have to show that they spent the money and all that. So I just want to make that known for the record. The same as town of Marineland. They were approved a couple years ago. They're not, they have not yet submitted for reimbursement. So that is also for the record due to them when they submit.
We did receive a request from Flagler Beach for the pier. Probably that 59,000 can be applied to that or remind them that's available.
Yeah, correct. Their finance knows that they
Okay.
still have a balance that they can submit receipts for.
And I was up in Marineland with Craig and the folks that manage Marina, and they were talking about expansion. They probably don't know there's 150 available here for them.
No, they do.
Oh, they.
Chris Kelly knows how this had to happen for them, that expansion that they're getting ready to start, maybe they have started. He had to secure committed grant funding so that he can apply for other grants. So,
This is a match.
and yes, so we had to commit to this. It's probably been 4 years.
Okay.
So he gives me an update probably every 6 to 8 months saying, okay, now we just got that grant, we're good. So he kind of keeps me updated as he gets the grants. And then the pandemic happened, but he emailed me recently and said, about 6 months ago, we are getting ready to start, we are good to go. So, but they can't get the reimbursement until the work starts, they pay, they show receipts. Yeah. So the other thing to note then is that in January, the TDC approved, and then in February, the BOCC approved $739,158 for eligible applicants to apply for capital projects. So that application process was just opened up last week. They have a year before their application is due. So in the past, it was only open up to government agencies. What the the board did is they revised it and opened it up to nonprofits as well. So there are $739,000 up for grabs to those qualified applicants. That includes the county. So I highly encourage the county to think about a project. It's a 50-50 cash match. You have to, so if you want to apply for $300,000, you have to show $300,000 cash. Obviously, it has to be tourism-related type of project. So that's something to keep in mind because the county is eligible to apply and has applied.
Would the Ag Museum be qualified for this one?
No, it's a separate, they
could apply for, as
They
a
could
county,
apply for that one. No,
from the county apply to work with them on this?
no, the Ag Museum would be the applicant.
Okay.
For
These are
that.
just county activities or projects.
Right.
Well, I'll have to talk about what kind of qualifications are.
I have a few ideas
Okay.
for the county to think about. So the Ag Museum, two separate things. The 150 was already committed through a resolution. They can also apply as a non-for-profit for that, under the 739,000.
Okay.
Yeah. So, once you take, you go to the last page on this page.
Oh.
Looks like this. Page 2.
Yeah, got it.
Okay. So here's things to note. We have carried over our decision unit where it says visitor center / experience center. Okay. So then it says the remaining allocated would be $2 million, but you have to take out the $59,000 for the city of Flagler Beach, $150,000 for Marineland, $150,000 for the Ag Museum, $739,000 for the grants.
I'm not sure that's, because if it's budgeted,
It's already taken.
it's already in there.
So you might have the 2 million there.
But that was what
22.
Mr. Karen was saying, it's not.
Yeah, we'll look at that, make sure you're.
Oh, yeah.
We'll make sure you're
I
straight.
think I think Amy's right, because we're not accounting it for here.
So it rolls forward, right?
Yeah, so we have to deduct it from the 2 million.
Just to, it makes sense to us, but like a regular citizen that looks,
Regular.
yeah, we're not the regular.
You mean they're not all budget experts?
We're the irregulars.
Yeah.
It looks like we have 2 million available.
Exactly.
Yeah, and so, just to keep, things clear, yeah. So for the visitor / experience center, I wanted to give an update and just for the record, a few things on that. So almost all counties have at least one, what they call a visitor center. The way it is now, and I'll call it a visitor center just for the sake, because that's what people are most familiar with. They're no longer a place where you just come in and get brochures and ask questions at the desk. It is much more than that now. They have figured out ways to make it a revenue stream where tourism partners also have the opportunity to have revenue come from there. Also, it's a community place. Also, it serves for the first stop for economic development, potential new residents. So it serves multi-purpose. The second thing to note is that the location, we're extremely limited where the smartest place we should be, which is in Flagler Beach where the visitors are, and the south side. So if you're thinking of people when they get off the highway and they're coming across, they go across 100, you don't want to make it difficult for them to have to turn left to circle back around, because the hub of all the activity is there on the south side. So in that CRA area is where we need to be to capture all the organic foot traffic, all the organic vehicle traffic. It's important that we're there embedded with the residents and the business owners. I can't stress that enough because it's very sensitive, trying to balance the needs of the residents for visitors and the demand that the tourists are putting on the city. I just saw recently that the residents in Sedona have asked the tourism office to stop marketing for a while, completely stop advertising because the strain. So I never want us to get to that place, and I always want to be very sensitive and on the same page as the residents and the business.
Same things occurring in St. Augustine.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, you could name
The
it
two
probably.
successful.
Yeah.
Yeah, Barcelona, the same thing. I mean, they went through that, and what was the other recent one?
Did you set up a meeting with the new city manager over there?
Yes, we met.
Okay, that's a good option.
Yeah, we definitely are open to that partnership with the city. We also are really active in partnering with Scenic A1A. So just recently, federal funds have been opened up, and I think it's the first time since like 2012, millions of dollars. And one of the things that they allow are visitor centers. And in 2012, when the program was open, they partnered with Indian River, and a visitor center was built there. The good news is that it's an 80-20, where 80% comes from the grant, and we would be responsible for the 20%. So we're very interested in partnering with the Scenic A1A. We've been in communication with them. We've been pulling up applications and criteria from the 2012 time period, and it's going to open up the fall, I think October. So we want to be ready, and that's why getting those renderings and conceptual is very important, so that we are ahead of that. Also, we've been researching how other counties have funded their visitor centers. Also, there's a facility bond opportunity. We're not above looking at adding additional revenue stream now. I mean, we want to in the future, but I think this might be a good time to start. Fundraising. We also want to keep in mind that there is new vacation rentals and that hotel that will happen in Flagler Beach. That old Bank of America building up top will be, and there are some projects now that are in the works where more oceanfront are adding higher end vacation rental properties. We want to be there and be ready when the hotel happens, and because cost and space is
More expensive.
it's getting more expensive, and the space is getting more limited. So, and I don't know either, Mr. Cameron, if that American Rescue Plan, if tourism qualifies for that, we would be interested. If that's a possibility, we would get a proposal and a plan ready for that. So
Preliminarily, it doesn't look like it does, but we don't have the details or the money yet.
right.
Checks in the mail.
Yes.
And I just want to make sure that we're kind of on the same page with the reserves. The 3.1 million reserves for 22 is not inclusive of the 150. The 150 is like assumed to be spent. So whatever's not spent during the carry forward process that we were talking about a little earlier, that's when the fund balance will come across with it, and those expenditures will come across with it. It would not be in the reserves. The reason the 1.1 million is in there is because it's not budgeted anywhere else. And that's the reason that's kind of stuck out there.
So you're saying that number will go up by 450,000 to 3.1 million?
Yeah, so if you just quick math, you take the 2.4,
358.
yeah, you take, you're getting you're saving 427,000 by not doing the debt service transfer, and that's your increase. That and the difference in the expenditure for 450 there. So that's your difference between the reserves. So just wanted to clear that up. So I don't want anyone to confuse out there. TV land.
In reserves.
Yeah, you have that amount. You do have reserves. it's not, you don't have to worry about the 150 because they're separate.
Okay.
They'll come-
Right.
Be added to it.
And what about the 739,000 for the grant?
That is.
That
in
comes out of
the-
the 2.2?
Yeah, that is part of that 3.1 already, instead of 44, because it's just an addition. to
Well, that's,
that-
yeah,
To the 3.3.
Right.
So that's part of the 3.1.
so the two reductions, see there 427 and 450, offset that with the 22,000 that you're gonna spend, that's kind of the difference, probably comes right close to the difference.
I apologize for coming in late, but the 150, 150, that means we're not gonna spend that. Is that what that said?
No,
It
that's
doesn't
No,
seem like
that's-
we're gonna spending it, so it might be available, most likely be available for the next year to be used on those, exclusively on those 3 line items.
Okay.
not.
Except the pier was used,
They've spent
like
$90,000.
$80,000 has been used, right?
90,000.
90,000.
They
Oh,
spent.
they've already.
Yeah.
So they are still eligible for 59,000 once they submit the reimbursement
Sure.
paperwork.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, well, the 739,000, you know, just because it's, I don't see it, so I was thinking if I get hit by a bus, we're all on the same
Yeah,
bus.
We know, yeah.
And then someone comes and applies and it's
The
not.
same bus, yeah.
Yeah. Where's the grant
But
money?
It's recorded, so we don't know.
Okay. That's why I said, let me just say this for the record. All right, so last fund, 111. So again, anticipating we'll do 600,000 in revenue for this fund. And now that we've paid off the debt, that's fantastic. The tax collector fees though would be 18,000, presuming that we collected the 600,000.
So
So
where are you getting the 600,000? I don't see it there. Is that the
Yeah.
same one?
I think that's the increase in revenue that you're expecting, right?
yes,
And we'll
Oh, okay.
we'll make that
Yes.
change
Okay.
for the tentative budget, we'll increase it.
Because it's not here.
correct.
No, when we created this, we were projecting
Oh, just
480,000.
480, okay.
So the beach fund now, so let's just say the debt's been paid, so we're kind of like starting with a clean slate. The beach fund also is considered a grant. So there is an application. When we had to take out the loan, we took the application off our website. So in the past, if anyone, not anyone, a municipality, government agency wanted to apply, there is also a beach application. So just keep that in mind because any spending out of this fund going forward has to go to the TDC for approval and then to the BOCC. And that usually is in the form of an application and a presentation. So I just wanted to let everyone know that for the record. In the past, we have helped fund Beverly Beach for walkovers. They fill out the application, it's that whole process. And this is all, of course, pre the loan that we took out. So we're kind of resetting this fund. So the county and the cities would apply for this beach fund. And this funding is not on the schedule like the others. It can be applied for anytime. It's
Is
the way
there
it's
any-
set up now.
With that loan or that project, is there any additional cost that project monitoring that needs to take place? Like we,
The 22 budget is the last year that requires monitoring for the permit that was pulled for
yes.
Hurricane Matthew. For whatever reason, we have to do additional monitoring. It's not currently in a contract requirement.
Okay.
So that's all I had about the beach fund
And are these reserves different or in addition to the ones we just talked about a few minutes ago?
The reserves,
These reserves on this 111, are they different or in the same?
completely separate.
Separate.
On 109, 110, all different reserves.
the 3 buckets.
Have different reserves?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Because I thought thought you said the 110 and 109 near the combiners or? No? Okay, misunderstood. Okay.
Amy, I think it's very important for you to identify the location for the Welcome Center. And let's move forward, because if you miss this business cycle, the next trough could be pretty deep.
Yeah. It makes me nervous every time I go out there and,
Well, let's see.
yeah.
Yeah, things are getting more and more expensive every
Yeah,
day.
every day.
Mhm.
Well, in addition to that, when it comes time to pay the piper on all of this overheating, it could be prolonged. As we pointed out earlier, the 2008 downturn, we haven't completely recovered as far as staffing is concerned. And I think it'll probably be 2025 before the county fully recovers from that.
So we've been digging around and researching and gathering information on what little possibilities there are. And one of the things that was brought to us was someone who owns land would be willing to do a 99-year lease. So I've never done a 99-year lease. I don't know what that looks like. I'm sure there's positives and
John has done a
negatives
few.
to all of it.
Actually, I've done a few.
But, just for the sake of conversation and on the heels of what Mr. Cameron just said, if that's something the county doesn't
It is
think I
built.
should
It's not
pursue.
off the table.
Uh-huh.
It's not something that governments usually do.
Yeah.
The reason is that people come and people go, but government goes on forever. So they don't think that, governments don't think there's any advantage to a 99-year lease, that they should own the property. And I'm not saying you have to take it off the table. It's not legally prohibited. It's just not considered good practice.
Yeah, it's usually the opposite. But then we have to build something though, right?
Yeah, no one's in favor of buying a building, apparently. So it seems like then the next, or the only other option would be to build a building.
Yeah, that buying the building, bringing up the station.
Yeah, yeah, the process, I kind of took hints from watching other transactions and said, I think we'll look into building.
At least we're trainable, right? At least we're trainable.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
Um,
Next we have, anything else on this?
yeah, I'm trying to think.
The one decision unit that you have, it's already in your budget, right? We just showed it there, so.
Yeah,
they'll just
yeah, that's
continue.
good to know. I didn't know. I did one just assuming that.
Sure.
Yeah.
It's better to have it than not have it. And,
Absolutely.
yeah, I think this, there's an opportunity. I know that the Chamber of Commerce is interested in possible partnerships. So we've been doing a lot of legwork behind the scenes to get as many organizations and groups involved, the businesses in the private beach. So there is a lot of opportunity. And for us, when we just talked about revenue stream, that's something that a lot of tourism organizations have started doing even a few years ago because of the threats of funding. So there's a few different ways to do that, but us having a physical brick and mortar, us no longer paying, $50,000 plus a year for rent will allow us to do that. We'll be able to have outfitters there for, water equipment, bikes, or, whatever the case may be, and have those businesses showcased in there as well, whether it be artists or the winery, the brewery, and have events there. And yeah, I think the opportunities are good. All right, so
Are you doing economic development as well, or is
yes,
Dolores coming?
Dolores is here, so we're just kind of gonna.
Okay. Amy,
Real quick, I can apologize for jumping in.
No, I'm glad.
Did you talk about like paying for lifeguards? Did that come up?
So only certain counties can pay for lifeguards under the tourism statutes. I think the requirement is you have to collect $10 million in fed tax revenue a year, which we won't be doing that. And then the population has to be really low. So it mainly applies to the panhandle. So if you think of like Walton County, Scambia, where they're very, very high tourists collect. I mean, I think they collect like $25 million, but have a very low population. That is the counties that qualify.
But aren't we paying half right now?
Not out of tourism.
No.
I'm not sure the
Where's that coming from?
We're paying them 82,500.
That's coming out of, FDR?
Yeah.
And we put in an automatic escalator.
Yes, yeah, CPI.
So,
Okay.
yeah.
Well, that's ad valorem. I thought it was TDC. Okay. Ad valorem.
The fireworks comes with TDC.
Yeah.
Fireworks.
Okay. All right.
Because they consider promotional.
Yeah, they do,
Yeah.
they do have about, what, $50,000 left that they could use on the pier.
59
Yeah.
for repairs.
That's already appropriated.
Yeah.
So the mayor had asked about getting some help with that.
Yeah.
That's available.
Yeah.
Right.
But they get a very fair deal on the lifeguards.
Right.
All right, so economic development.
Moving over to economic development. So Dolores and I both worked on this together. She was more in the weeds of everything, and she made some changes in some line items where she cut in some but added to another. So she'll go through of what she was able to streamline. And there's 2 decision units here. The good news is that they're both lower in cost today, and we've cut some items since, so we'll update you on those once we get to them. So Dolores, if we want to start with professional services, you'll see now it's a 0 where before it was 5,000. So if you want to.
Okay, first from a very high level point of view, when I came here about 7 months ago, I went through and wanted to streamline, since before economic development was its own entity with its own budget and not really part of the county organization. It's kind of its own unit. I wanted to look and see how we could streamline services. For instance, they had their own website. Actually, they had 2 different websites or 3 different websites that I could find. It didn't make sense to continue that, since the county has a website, tourism has a website. Why are we paying for 3 different websites and 3 different services? So those contracts that we had with SparX, I was able to cancel that. There were 2 others that we have let fall off since that time. And like the SparX was $6,000 that was able to be canceled since I first came on board, and other different things. And just streamlining some of those duplication of services. There were a cost of living index that we were paying for that you can get for free. So why would we pay for that? We also were paying for a service for Salesforce that the contract actually ends in August 21, that we will let lapse because we get that for free with our memberships with Jack's USA. So it's finding a lot of these kind of instances by going through all of the records and saying, why are we duplicating services when we're getting them for free or through strategic alliances with other partners? So that I spent a lot of time on unraveling, going through all of the records
That's good work.
to save the county money. It just didn't make, to me, like we were paid $500, which isn't a lot of money for MACME. Well, we have an incredible GIS department. Why are we paying for MACME? I mean, $500 isn't a lot of money, but we can put it to use somewhere else.
Is that the promotional activities line? Is that where we find most of that?
I found that actually in professional services.
Uh-huh.
You know, so I was just finding all these little hidden items throughout the budget
We
that.
had, yeah, there was, Gazelle,
Gaz-
lead generation and research software was 12,000, and that was under,
Professional, no, that was.
data.
Yeah, just things all throughout the budget that I was finding.
So
Previously.
all these negatives you have on these line items are reductions that you made.
Yes.
So in total, almost like $16,000.
Oh, over that throughout the thing, that I just started writing my notes, you know. It was like an MBAA, which was a membership that through a strategic alliance, that was the national, going back to the budget, that I can buy a strategic alliance with our aviation folks. I don't need to be paying for that. It just, at any rate,
So that's the good news.
that's the good news.
That doesn't mean that, enter the decision units, that, we went ahead and submitted. So we can go to the first one, which was for 3410 for 10,000. This has since been, reduced 7,500. So if you want to talk a little bit, Dolores, about, what you want to do with those funds.
That is actually to be able to, since I'm part of the tourism element and economic development works closely with tourism, all the collateral materials that were done in the past were branded in such that I had to basically ditch it all because Helga's name was on everything, my predecessor. And it was all branded
With
with her
her
big picture
contact
and
information. So,
all of that, as well as the old websites, and it wasn't counting. Now that the tourism department has awarded an RFP, you want to brand things where everything works together. And it needs to go with what Amy is putting in with a consistent look and feel with the county. Most of the old collateral were stock images. It did not reflect Flagler County. It did not have images of what Flagler County has to offer. Why would we use stock images when Flagler County has so much to offer? It needs to marry with the tourism department. So that is what this money set aside is to work with Amy's RFP. And then once we get the guts done, then we can hand it over to our current creative team to do the one-offs and all.
Dolores, for the public's benefit, tell us what you mean by stock.
Stock images are where you buy an image of generic beach.
Landscape.
Or landscape, or
Not even necessarily in Flagler County.
nothing in Flagler County. You just buy an image from random photographer that has nothing to do.
that can be
with-
used anywhere USA.
Exactly.
So with the Crowdrisk
Yes.
software, she's
Being
able to
benefited.
use, she benefits, now that she's a part of this, where we can pull those photos for her. So if she wants to create a particular marketing piece, she can use that, yeah.
And things that I have done in the past, you know, everything has an image of what place I have served, and you can do big. When we were working with some of the clients that have come and visited us, we had to wind up using a notebook. We didn't have anything professional to hand them. And it just, you have one chance to make a first impression. So stock images or random photographs from other parts of the country do not make a good first impression when we are special in ourselves, in my opinion.
So,
So, The 7,500 is just a one-time.
Yes, it's a one-time fee.
That's the good news about these decision units.
It's just one-time.
I'm not looking for this to be a reoccurring fee, it's a one-time fee.
So this will allow the recreation of the collateral, whether it's the folders and,
Individually pieces, whatever we may need. It could come in less because they may, depending on how much we want to do or not do. That's just an outside figure. The second unit that I am looking at asking for is for other contractual services. And I have reduced that to 40,000. The reason why is I originally was looking at doing an economic development element in a comprehensive plan as well as a housing element in a comprehensive plan. And since someone else is taking the lead on the housing element in the comprehensive plan, we can deduct that amount. Why do we need an economic development element in the comprehensive plan? Well, regional planning councils like to do something called the CEDS, which is Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy. In order to get grants from the federal government, you have to be part of the CEDS, number one. Regional planning councils, like to see you have your own economic development element. In places I have served in the past, I have always written the data and analysis, which I have no problem doing, but we have contracted the others outside agency to do the GOPs, the goals, objective, policies, as well as all the legalese to make sure that, and go in to make sure that it doesn't conflict with other elements in the comp plan and do all the red lines, because that gets into legal things and quite frankly beyond my scope. Other counties in the areas that have economic development elements, and although that is not required by the state, it is encouraged by the state. Putnam County, like this is Putnam County's economic development element. Lake County, Citrus County, Orange County, Dade County, Martin County, Hillsborough County, Okaloosa County, Brevard, Pope, Palm Beach County, Putnam, Clay County. So it's just good practice to have an economic development element in your comprehensive plan. It is encouraged by the U.S. Department of Economic Opportunity. If you're wanting grants for any kind of infrastructure work to help you along, it's encouraged by the Department of Economic Opportunity at the state level. It just puts you in a more favorable position if you're looking for any future grants.
So that would take that one to 40,000.
Or how about the 10,000 at the bottom of the page? Is that included in
No,
that?
Now this is the second.
Two
That
separate.
was actually reduced, the 10 was reduced.
Oh, that was,
Yeah.
this one.
Yeah.
That was that one. Okay, got it.
Which, that one.
That was this one.
Yeah.
Right.
That one's.
7,500,
Got it.
the other one's 40,000.
Right, okay.
All right, so any questions on any of those? We did want to touch on page 431, Amanda, just for the record and some education of incentives.
I have another thing I worked diligently on, going through all of the records that were left behind, both hard copy as well as electronic copy. Made huge spreadsheets on all of the different possible awards. Designs for Help was only awarded out of all of that $250 on 4/5/2017
For one job.
for one job.
And it hasn't changed since.
And they have not received no records of any disbursement since that time. Then
Does the agreement have a time bound when they need to do it or lose the incentive?
there is no record of that.
And I,
What we're saying is they haven't
They have
achieved
not,
Yeah,
what they were supposed to achieve,
Yeah.
so we haven't paid any money on it.
right, just $250 years ago.
Yeah.
the funds are kind of locked. For
No.
them.
It's locked.
They're not.
Well,
but they have not achieved with it. I have, AVO Engineering, it was revoked by Florida DEO on October 15th, 2015, contemporary I mean, I've got spreadsheets of the lawsuit that, then, let me find Kimball on my spreadsheets. Kimball,
they've got,
the award, they were supposed to create 40 jobs in 4 years. They received payment in fiscal year 2018 of $1,500 on February 24th of 2019 and $750 on 9/1/2020. And they have not received any money since then because they have not created their 40 jobs.
they have, I think we said they have 9.
They have created 9
9
jobs.
jobs, and they've been paid $2,250.
Correct. Buick Development,
Go to, hold on. Follow
yeah,
us.
okay,
Yeah.
the
Geosales.
Geosales, they have exceeded expectations. They have they were supposed to create 53 jobs, they have almost created 100,
And they've been paid $42,000.
and they've been paid for, yes. And they're actually breaking ground on their second building.
Yeah, they're a success.
They're a success
They
story
are.
all the way.
They
They're- And then
Geotech,
UTEC, their agreement was revoked,
Revoked, you said?
they
yes.
sold,
They sold the
they
building.
sold the
sold the
building, so
building.
they only got
And-
paid $15,000, 0 jobs.
And 0 jobs, and they sold the building in May of 2020.
US1.
So in summary of just those 4, now there's others, like she said in her spreadsheet, the county's paid $59,500 in incentives for 105 jobs, which equals $567.
So Mr. Bulick is out of the business now since he sold that building, right? That,
Yes,
Yeah.
it's done.
good, he bothers me a lot. Once in a while, we have to put a tenant in that building, but now he sold it.
So we just wanted to share that with you and give you some
I don't
data,
know if y'all want this.
but any questions?
Are we still obligated? I mean,
Yeah, that's my.
should we take that off of the budget pages?
Geotech is,
Well, you can get rid of that
Buick
one,
is
that's
Yeah,
revoked.
so
So we can move that.
first one too. Okay. We just need to clean it up, update it.
Yeah.
any questions? Thank you for indulging us some extra information and time.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
We're released?
Yeah, thank you.
guys.
Go out and do great things.
Absolutely.
See you next year.
Thank you, Dolores.
Next is Faith Alcati from Engineering Director.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Drop together or what?
I guess I'm here.
Yeah.
You probably want to go and then I'll just be there.
Okay.
He's probably just gonna be, flying over there once it's done.
And everything makes sense to you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, it's a complex.
Would it be an equal swap? We wouldn't have to pay any money? Yeah.
I'm just not sure. Oh,
Yeah. That's pretty cool. Then we have to-
Thanks for your patience. Faith, appreciate it.
Who are working, so we have a plan.
30 minutes.
Oh.
We're having fun.
Good morning, Faith.
Good morning.
Welcome.
Thank you, Deferred, Engineering Director. I do have with me Richard Gordon and Gracie. Richard Gordon, it's his last workshop meeting for the last 33 years.
Very familiar.
So we asked him to come and attend just because it's his last one. Gracie, everybody knows Gracie. She's the one who works on this budget. She does really great job and she always keeps us in line. So with all that said, we can start talking about engineering department budget summary. I do see here you included first with the expenditures, but I would like to start talking about engineering department revenues. How much revenues this department will bring to Flagler County almost every year. It varies between 20 million to 15 million. And all these revenues is all grant funding, 100% grant funding. So with all that said, we can start talking about our expenditures.
You said between 12 and 15,
I'm sorry?
12 and 15 million, you said?
No, between 20
Oh.
million to 15 million. Like this year, we have a $15 million project, the Dunes projects, and also Marineland Acres, the millions, the bridge 10 millions. We're having some resurfacing coming up in July project, 4 million, 5 million. In design phase, another 3, 4 million. So that's almost every year. This is what amount of revenues the engineering department they bring to Flagler County. What we do in the engineering department, we start the project from the planning phase to the construction phase. And when I say the planning phase, we create our work program. We'll go, we ask for the funding, we bring the funding in, and we start working on our projects to do these improvements to Flagler County. Looking at now the expenditures, the first line item, it's about the personnel services. In the engineering department, we have 7 positions. At this time, we have only 5 filled. We have 2 vacancies. So all that said, I know it looks to me it has been increased by 1%, and the 1% it is because of the COLA. Usually our operating budget and our also personal services, it's a flat number. With these 2 vacancies, so far we have a savings 73,596. We're trying to fill in these 2 vacancies. I wish we'll be having good luck to hire, especially the CAD technician. It's really very important to us to have this position in the department. It will help us doing a lot of in-house, some design services. But at this time, it's really very hard to find some qualified people to come in and do that. And if anybody qualified, they are interested to apply, please.
And that's in the current budget, that's funded.
It has been funded for the last, I don't know, forever. The other project administrator, and this is needed. As I mentioned, at this time, we're going to have 5 people, myself, Richard Gordon, Amy, and Walden, 2 of them project managers. I have Richard, he's the assistant county engineer, and myself. And of course, we do have a Gracie. She's the grant coordinator at this time.
Faith, for the folks that are listening up there, what is the administrator you were talking about?
Project administrator, basically what we are looking for right now, somebody with engineering technical expertise, and they have to be a licensed engineer in the state of Florida. Because this, as I mentioned, we are limited to our resources. We're having only a couple of project managers, so that's what we are lacking at this time. I need someone with some technical engineering expertise to get things done, reviewing plans, comments, coordinating with a lot of government agencies. As I mentioned from the beginning, most of our work coordinating with other agencies, federal, FEMA, Corps of Engineers, San John Water Management District, DEP, FDOT, of course, are on the top of our list. So we do a lot of coordination, but also there's a lot of technical engineering involved in that. So that's what the project administrator.
And the block to keep us from hiring is salary, right?
Correct.
We can't offer enough money.
That's last time I did advertise for a project administrators. I got good applicants there, and even one of them, he was working here and he left because of the funding. He wanted to work for another county. He came back, he applied, but I could not, or there was no funding to be available to up. Even he getting salary cut there to get the position here, but I could not even meet that requirement. Yes, that's the reason, because of the salaries. And as you know, right now with the stimulus funding, everything was going on with the engineering, with the economy, that's what everybody's looking for, engineering field staff.
So Faith, on the salaries, so folks that are looking at this, it's not a mistake, this is 1%, it's not a 1% increase, this number includes a 1% COLA.
It's called cost of living, we have, over control of that number, I think it was provided by the finance department.
But this includes actually an additional FTE.
No, it's there, it's part of that, it's part of it, but right now it's vacancy, as I
It's
mentioned.
vacancy, got it.
Two of them vacancy, and I say, even if I hire someone today, I will have some savings, $73,000 for the upcoming year. Our operating expenditures, again, is flat since I started here. For the last 16 years, this is what varies between 30,000 up to 40,000. This is the way how it is at this time. The copier lease, I asked Gracie, which is additional $1,335. I asked Gracie, what's that? Why it was not included last year? She started explaining whatever it was not, and now it is. They changed the copies and all that. If you need more information, we can share with you about this number. But as you can see, that's the only increase in our operating budget for this year. Going back for equipment, and that for the equipment, we would like to replace one of the trucks we do own, which is GMC. It's model 2006. It needs to be replaced, and the cost for that, we included $27,620. That's for that. I think that will summarize overall our budget. I told my staff it's going to be a couple of minutes, and if anybody has any more questions, we can go over, but we're really very busy with a lot of things to do back there. I think there is 2 decision units.
Okay.
We can go over that. Okay, the first one. Two facets, okay?
Construction inspector.
Construction inspector. What we are asking for, a salary for a construction inspector, his annual salary will be $62,000, and including any other miscellaneous activity to include to this cost, it will be $89,000. I don't know, you get him laptop, you get him whatever things he needs to do his job with other overhead costs. This position, it was part of the engineering department for a very, very long time until Mr. Cameron came here, 2020. He said, Faith, we have a problem with our budget. I need you to eliminate a position. I eliminated that position. It came now to this point, I need an inspector. I need him, or her, whoever. Looking at the market value for this kind of inspector, right now they are paying $115 per hour, which that means $239,000 per year for construction inspector out there in the private sector.
Who's doing this task right now?
Nobody.
Awesome.
Last year, nobody. We're trying at this time to depend on our construction engineering inspection and also my project manager, and that's why I keep saying we are spread thin. So they try to make that kind of part of their activities. They are not doing it as much as we want to, but this position is really very critical for us. It's not only to inspect the own construction activities, but also if we have an issue, they can go out there, do some kind of engineering report, come back to us, and then we will decide when we hear about complaint about issue and get some recommendation based on engineering techniques, and we'll take it from there, the project manager. Instead of project manager getting paid $80,000 a year, spending 2-3 hours on the road, we'll have somebody like that handle these tasks for us.
Is this higher than mid salary, or you're counting it to be a higher salary?
I don't think anybody will come and work for you for less than $62,000.
No, I mean that 60,000 is the top of the salary or the midpoint?
I don't know, usually.
That's
it a midpoint?
Less
Okay,
than
less than midpoint. So usually I put the salary, which I think is reasonable.
Okay, I just want to know which words.
Okay.
Faith, how long had that position been vacant before you graciously gave it to us to balance the budget?
It was vacant for 2 years, and for the same reason, I could not afford to hire someone, and at that time, I have an AutoCAD person, and that AutoCAD person, basically, I could not find somebody. He was retired, he came one day, I'm gonna say it, he came one day to say, hi, how are you, Faith? After 2 years, I say, are you looking for a job? He said, no. I say, I need you here. And he accepted that position, and he was doing both, AutoCAD plus inspection. I agree with you.
See, I didn't know you when I first came here, and now I know you would never do this. But vacant positions are a place where department heads hide money for their budget and use it as a contingency
Where's
fund.
John at?
Sounds like me talking about it.
So that was one of the reasons that I asked you to graciously surrender that position.
Correct, but also the reason because we cannot afford them wherever money available, we cannot hire someone, and they will ask how much what we can afford.
Have you asked Faith, have you asked Pam to have the salary consultant to take a look at that position?
At this time, as Gracie said, you have a big grade, and what's the minimum range and what's the maximum range? But Flagler County, they have this kind of mentality. They want to hire someone at the minimum of the pay grade. And for our field, that does not work out. If somebody making 60,000, they want to come, and they are qualified. If you want to hire the qualified people, we are willing to train people, but there is certain certification.
But we can move into pay grade for experience and certifications.
Correct.
Yes.
Yes, but for me, even when they have the minimum range, I don't know how they create that, but right now, this is the market for these positions, and that's why everybody has to consider. And when people, they apply and they move from one workplace to another, they want more money.
But that's what the consultant is supposed to do, is find out what the market bears. And if you can't hire at the number that they've come up with, there may very well be a mistake in their calculations. So just get Pam to go back to the consultant and have them to look at that position.
Okay, we'll do that.
Because that's what we want to do, is we want to hire in the market range. That's the point.
I know you want to hire in the market range, and also I want to hire the qualified people to get the
The
things
market,
done.
that is the qualified, the market range.
So are we having an issue with the range, or we're having an issue where we're setting to hire the person? Because if it's mid-range, that tells me that this position could go probably up to 80 or 90,000, right? The top of the range.
This is when we advertise for a position, we have, I think the range, we post the
Yeah, the range,
range.
yeah, so somebody can see that.
And people, they will put what the number they wanted. Like an example, I advertise for project administrator, I have a range, and I have an application, one application. We have 3-4 applications. One application, he's very qualified. I look, he asked for the maximum of that range. So from me, I know how much in my budget's there. I don't know how much they have for the administrator. How much you budgeted for the administrator? 70,000? So that's what they budget for the administrator, but I have somebody asking for 108,000, the maximum of the range.
For this position?
For the project administrator, I'm giving you an example.
Okay.
So I asked Gracie, okay, I'm gonna call him for an interview, but first question we ask him, is this number negotiable? And we'll take it from there. Some of them, they say negotiable, some of them like, no, this is, I cannot come and meet with you. At this time, they making 96, they making 100,000. So to relocate, they want to make 8%, 10% additional salaries. So that's what's happening to that position. I think I have one more position there, which is administrative assistant. And this is, it's an old position we had there. It was originally Gracie. And right now I'm adding it. I'm asking the salary of that position, the minimum hourly rate, which is $15.48, and that will be like $32,000. And then plus benefits, overhead, whatever you include, I think the number will be 51,000.
Now, this is Gracie's old position.
This is Gracie old position before she became project manager and office manager, and right now you are a grant
Coordinator. So you reclassified her to grants coordinator, and we're gonna move someone in to her former position.
Correct.
So that's actually an increase of 1 FTE.
Correct. And what happened in the old days, the last few years, she has been doing all this at one position, which is office manager, until when you did the salary study, we did ask them to take a look at her position, and that's when they reclassified her position. And she has been doing it also for the last 2 years. She's doing 2 positions, but it came to the point, again, too many projects, too many grants and coordination with other grant agencies and agreements. So we need that position really for a lot of other activities. We're doing it, but we're doing it part-time. Whenever we have time, she will try to get it done. So there is a need for it right now. I think that will conclude our budget, unless if Richard and Gracie, they would like to add anything.
Out of the two, which,
The truck you want to buy is, so that's not an ask, that's in your budget,
That's part of the rolling stuff.
part of the rolling stock.
Yes.
It only at 27,000, is that enough money to buy the truck?
I think that's the
Is that
number,
right?
that's the number what we got from Fleet.
Okay.
I think rolling stock we're talking, this afternoon.
Yeah.
Or no,
Well, it's in our budget for
This morning.
27,000.
The rolling stock that's in this, for this fiscal year is in everyone's budget.
Okay.
But we're
But-
talking about the entirety of it. At,
But
11,
my-
15 or something.
My understanding is in 2024.
It was originally budgeted to be replaced in 2024, so we asked the Fleet to bump it up.
So they did fund it, and, okay.
We rolled most replacement forward last year to get a handle on the budget, so.
Well, truck was 2006.
Yeah.
It's time.
It's really time, it costs us to maintain
Maintain
it
it, yeah,
more than
more,
going
yeah.
and buying one. Yes, there's a need for it, yes. Any more questions?
Well, only that what you need to do is fill out the instructions on how you get the 20 to 50 million dollars a year, put it in a sealed envelope and give it to me in case something happens.
I'm going to go to your ag museum for you, if something happens. We have been really very successful, working hard. It's not only the engineering departments, the commissioners, administration providing the support and give us go and get things done, not to be monitoring everything what we do. So, and also not to forget other organizations who work with us. If DOT staff, they have been tremendous help to us. They will work with us, the Corps of Engineers, even FEMA. So it's a team effort. We have been lucky, and we have been working hard, and great job to everybody. It's not only to the engineering department, so.
So I'm not bothering you too much, so I keep talking about your office.
No, you are not commissioner anytime, and we doing a lot of things for your district in that area. It's a lot of things happening, more coming to that area, and we do appreciate your support.
We need to send Richard over to the clinic to get the cell sample, so.
Yes, and for the record, Richard, last day, September 1st, we tried to convince him to stay 2 more years.
2 more years, yeah.
Well, Richard, as long as it was after July the 3rd.
You see? Yes, so that's the engineering department. Again, we are doing our best. It's, as you mentioned, I asked Richard to calculate the revenue bringing in and how much it's costing to run and have the engineering department. It's costing Flagler County 1% of the revenues we're bringing in for all these grants and projects. We are so proud of what we do. We have to say it.
Nice job. Nice job.
Thanks, Dave, appreciate it
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank
You want
you.
to take a 10-minute break?
Sure.
We'll get into the CIP. I'm gonna pause the recording.
For me,
So.
We'll come back in 10 minutes.
Yeah, yeah, we involved in it or no?
Heidi's got it.
And for anybody who's still watching out there, we're just on break and we will be returning shortly.
Okay, welcome back. We have Heidi and Mike, Capital Projects.
Okay, we're first going to go over the Beachfront Parks Capital Fund. This fund was established as part of the Hammock Dunes DRI. So this funding is for capital expenses. It can only be used within the designated greenway in the hammock, certain locations that it can be used for. This is for capital construction. The fund started with a little over $1 million in it, and over the course of time, it has been used to fund certain improvements within that greenway area. We don't have anything anticipated for next year. We do have a remaining balance, a little bit over 400,000 remaining in that fund right now.
Is there any continuing revenues going into that fund?
No, other than,
Interest.
your interest, other than interest, that's pretty much it.
That's not there. Well,
Is there any discussion to improve that property at all? I mean, with I don't know, I've never walked in there. Trails or anything like that?
There are certain things that we could do with that, and Mike and I were actually talking about that. One of the things that we have identified on our CIP is a connector that would essentially put in a pedestrian walkway bridge that would go over the drainage that sits on the south side of Malacompra Road, that would gain access to that parcel of land in the trail system.
Just to go over the canal?
Basically to go over
Malacompra
Malacompra Canal. That's one of the things we have it on our CIP. It can be used for that.
Sure.
We also talked about, we had some damage to the park on the south side of Malacompra. The what's outlined here on the screen where you see that Hammock Dunes DRI. There was a pavilion and some dune walkovers that had been destroyed from prior storms. I don't know that we received full reimbursement for those, but monies could be used there to go back and improve that property and put some of those structures back in, and that would be a viable expense out of that 400,000. But we'd have to dig a little deeper into that and see what we can come up with for some projects there. Nothing slated though for next year. Then we also have, it ran in conjunction with the capital side as part of that Hammock Dunes DRI. Money was set aside for maintenance activities that were associated with that greenway, which the greenway runs along A1A as well as a few different park locations. So you've got that Malacompra Beachfront, you've got Jungle Hut, you've got 16th Road, as well as that A1A trail where the money could be used. This is for ongoing maintenance. So this again is not something that has anything identified as being used. We had used it in the past for some billable staff time to do certain activities in that area, but again, nothing's been identified.
Trash removal, can you pay for trash removal out of that?
Certain areas, yes. It has to be used within that designated DRI Greenway Trail.
Yeah, but that's several of our parks, right?
You
said you included 16th Street,
16th,
Jungle Hut,
Jungle Hut, and Malacompra Beachfront, which is the south
Right.
side, not the north.
Right.
And then A1A. So we did use it before for doing some of those maintenance activities. And they are identified. We had an ordinance or resolution back in 98, a resolution that it identified certain activities where it could be used and how it could be used. So,
Okay.
but nothing really significant. I mean, this could be used for maintenance. So this could be used for, preservation of some of those park facilities that we have. Painting, new
Sure.
roofs, things like that, as long as it supports that greenway.
it seems even though we don't have any additional revenues coming in, the interests are kind of keeping things.
Keeping it
here.
moving,
Yeah.
yes. So then that brings us to the half-cent discretionary sales tax. This runs right around close to $3 million a year. I know that In the current fiscal year, we had budgeted a little bit less. I think that's probably due to impacts related to COVID. Historically, it's been around 2.9 million. Right now, the only allocated expense that we have in this fund is to offset the sheriff's jail operations. That's really the only anticipated expenditure. And that would pretty much take up all of the incoming revenue for that fund.
And that was the purpose of shifting that so that we would have money for debt service over in the general fund, which you couldn't really do with that, the way it was allocated.
Right.
That's why we use this for the jail.
That's
We're
what
gonna use
That's
this
correct.
for debt service.
That's right.
Okay.
The non-ad
Right.
fund revenue.
Yeah.
So make sure you get that in there.
Yes, oh, I understood that.
It was part, about freeing up that general fund money, we had the ability to move other monies around and to obligate for the sheriff's operations. So
And we don't need any more money for Carver, Jim, that 200,000.
Well, we had the 200,000 that's earmarked for
For this year.
this year. I think we have a total of 400,000.
Right, that's what I thought was bigger.
And then 50,000 was a donation from the foundation. So we've got 450,000 total. That's for phase one. It's basically half of the project.
have they started it yet?
We're starting this week to do some of the earthwork removal, and we'll be hauling dirt by the end of the week.
Well, I guess, why didn't the other 250,000 show up? I mean, it's in the notes, but why isn't it in one of the columns?
The columns there, if you notice, is budgeted, it's basically the adopted budget for FY
Right.
2021. You would see that additional money in the amended budget. If we had a column for the amended budget, you
I
would see
got
that.
that. Okay, all right.
Other than that, you don't have anything running through there. The remainder, you've got sitting in reserves for future. So you've got roughly almost 1.7 million sitting in this fund for future reserves.
Could it be used for any capital project?
For 311?
I believe so.
Yes, it's
I
general,
believe so.
Discretionary.
general revenue
Yes.
cannot be used for debt, basically.
No, but I mean,
Not for
discretion
debt
board, they
service.
can use it for other capital projects. It's not restricted.
Yeah, and the one concern is when the budget, when the revenue does not come in at
Yeah.
3 million, because then we're
Yeah.
tapping into fund
Yeah,
balance.
tap.
Right.
Could
You
easily
go
some
to the
amount,
reserve.
Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. And talk about the budget, the adopted, we do have a lower adopted revenue, but the revenue did come in higher than that.
Okay.
But we don't change the adopted budget once it's adopted.
But the COVID effects with the gas tax, it's still gonna affect us, isn't it? Or no, you don't?
There
Still
are
getting the
effects
same
in other
amount.
areas, it's just for,
We're getting the gas tax money. is what you're saying.
I think it's about flat. Gas tax maybe a little lower,
A
little down because people weren't driving around. The sales tax
It's staying okay.
was pretty strong, I think, because people ordering food out, and
Sure.
whatever, they were still having gas.
Okay.
So, yeah. So it's interesting to look back, see what it really.
See what it really
Yeah,
affected.
yeah, it's really
So moving forward, that brings us up
The
to
gas
gas tax, constitutional gas tax, the 112 fund. And this has been primarily used as the cash flow for some of the engineering projects that you have related to roadways and things like that. In the past, I know you can see, moving forward, we're not using it in this manner, but years prior, it was used to support some of the capital equipment for public works in fiscal year 19 and 20. But moving forward, we move those expenditures into a different fund.
And if I could just add we had to move the gas tax revenue out of that fund and put it into the other operating fund, just because the expenditures were too high in the other gas tax fund. So we don't have a lot of revenue going into this fund anymore. We're just working off the fund balance for the grant matches and that kind of stuff. So that's that operating fund is something we're gonna have to address in the coming years because of
Wouldn't
that,
be sustainable.
because of the expenditures being too high.
Okay, so why did we move it to the 102? Just I think you just said that, and do it with me.
Because the operating expenditures are going up, the personal services, that kind of stuff. We added, I think, 6 people for the dunes, and they were supposed to kind of drop off after a time. So we're in the process of getting that done. So, but the expenditures are too high for the incoming revenue. So we had to, in 102.
In the 102.
So we had to move
We
the,
need to move that over.
yes,
So, John, for folks out there, me, that I don't know what 102 means, it's actually Public Works.
Public Works.
Yeah,
Yeah.
fund gas tax revenues to Public Works.
right. So we went over Fund 102 earlier today, and it was with the public works folks, yeah.
That was the
Road and
first
bridge
one
guys.
that we had done this morning, but it is Fund 102. So.
And then this is what's available there. This actually was getting funded through the gas tax. Now it's just whatever we have in reserves that can be used for the engineering projects.
Correct.
Okay.
Right.
Correct. So that brings us up to, should be general asset preservation.
General asset preservation. Oh, okay.
So these are projects that we have identified as part of our CIP moving forward that we're able to fund. And these are primarily outlined. These are all facility preservation, so you'll see to the right where it says it's for HVAC replacement, roof replacement. We did meet as a CIP team and prioritize some of those projects that had been on hold or deferred. So we've picked up a few that we need to get done next year, which will be the vinyl siding replacement on our facility up at River to Sea Preserve, currently used by the folks at GTM Nerf. We also have painting of Carver Center, the exterior of that building. We've got some fencing liability issues there at Hidden Trails that we wanted to identify, as well as some improvements to the Herschel King boat ramp.
You are gonna replace the roof on the Justice Center. You're gonna do that?
We have that budgeted for next year, yes,
With it leaks.
it does.
But there's something here about 300,000 for justice.
We've got 300,000 identified for that for next
Yeah,
year.
yeah, we talked about, the way that we came up with the list was we looked at any safety related item and any liability got a higher priority. And that one is a liability to not have a roof at Justice Center.
Yeah, for all the records.
So moving forward, our next things that we were looking at were non-preservation, but more of your general capital project items. So what we had identified again collectively as a CIP team looking for a higher liability or exposure issues, things that we need to do immediately. We looked at the health department, dental lab expansion. As you know, we provide that facility to the state health department. Dental is a huge program that they provide there. They've outgrown the space.
Didn't we already do that?
This has been something that they've asked for multiple years.
I thought we did it last year.
No.
Oh, we
No.
actually did it.
No, we haven't done it yet, so we put that in there and we identified funding for it. It's been on our project list
Right.
For a long time.
Right?
for a long time, not funded, so we're funding it for next
That's
year.
good. That's good.
Where are you planning on putting it?
It's on the front of the facility. If you,
Up in my alcove?
that alcove, it would be
Exactly.
built out, yes.
One of the things that might offset this cost is the rescue plan calls for health related items.
Yeah,
This might be.
might be able to find that.
Yeah, do it.
And
Yeah, we need to use that on the, fund all these backlogs,
Correct,
things, everything that we
We'll create
can.
a list, yeah.
Yeah,
And we
these would be good uses of that money.
Oh, it would definitely. We talked yesterday a little bit about coming up with a strategy for identifying projects. And once we know that that money is here, we're probably gonna have to go back and look at our CIP. There's other projects related to the health department that would probably be eligible, that are on our list that have been deferred, really due to lack of funding. But if we can use some of that American Rescue Plan money, we can probably knock some of those off.
Actually, this afternoon, the 14th, we're talking just about this.
Yeah.
This afternoon.
So the other one that we have on here is Bull Creek Campground. Again, we talked about that budget this morning. There is a need there for replacement of the existing drain field and replacement expansion of their current RO system. Right now, that RO system only provides water
To the
for the restaurant or concessionaire out there. The thought was if we were able to expand that, we would be able to provide drinking water to the restroom facility that we have there that supports this park as well as the individual campsites
I think for sure that we can use some rescue money
for that.
if you're expanding it.
And we would be expanding it. In both of these cases, we would be expanding. So it's another one that we probably would have to take a look at maybe this afternoon as potentials, which would maybe free up some of this money to be reallocated for some other expenditures. So we also have in here 400,000 for the Southern Library design. And we have some Graham Swamp restroom and improvements that we have identified there as well. I believe the Graham Swamp restroom improvements, that's the addition of new facilities on Old Kings Road, right? Is it Old Kings or not Old Kings? Culvert Lane.
So it's a mountain bike trailhead, we could call that.
It would support that. Some parking lot improvements and some restroom facilities there, improving the time there on Culvert Lane. So I think that's all we had identified for next year. We do have, again, this was part of the CIP team discussion where we've identified improvements moving forward. Some of them are capital related and some of them are preservation. We touched upon it a little bit this morning about the need for putting more money into preservation of existing facilities and what that does with our operating moving forward. Over the years, a lot of these tasks had been deferred, and now it's compounding to a point that we really need to address them. You know, we look at roof replacement moving forward. We're also looking at, you know, carpet replacement, you know, a lot of the flooring, different things like that. You know, driveways, parking lots, lighting, different elements that we had identified that were in need of replacement. Some of our ongoing ones are, you know, every year we know we have ACs that need to be replaced, and we're identifying roofs moving forward. The big one for next year, again, was that Justice Center. But, and a lot of these capital improvement things that we're trying to fund compete with technology projects as well. So in years prior, we've only allocated, I think it was under $1 million. Moving forward, we're trying to come up with a strategy to tackle some of these issues, adding money to preservation. I know collectively at staff level, we talked about putting additional money if there is increases in valuation that can be put towards these.
To move some of them
To
this year.
Yeah. But definitely probably need to go back and look at the list of opportunities that we can use some of that American Rescue Plan funding to plug some of these holes. So what do we have to now here? So now this is our unfunded list. And you can see some of these, you know, the construction of the new library. There was a request made by the supervisor of election to expand some of her early voting space. We've got, I know that through an earlier workshop, we talked about the need for fire station replacement, you know, hardening of some of our facilities, expansion. So this is pretty much a roll-up of what those unfunded list looks like, and we're roughly at like $33 million of unfunded projects.
And the total rolling number of all these capital projects and preservation is you have it there, right?
Roughly, it's about $82 million. When you look at the things that we have on the horizon that are unfunded. We've got a lot of competing challenges, and I think if we're able to maybe identify some of these where we can use alternative funding sources, we've got the total roll up is $82 million of projects. Not all of them are necessarily in the general fund. We do have, of that 82 million, you've got roughly about 28, almost 29 million is for the airport. The airport is an enterprise fund, so although we may have to cash flow some of his reimbursement base, but in looking at this 82 million, it's closer to 50.
If we prioritized it, yeah.
We met as a team and we kind of looked at the funding available and going through, as Jorge mentioned, what are the priorities for preservation and exposure for, increased liability or increased need of replacement or repairs if they went, unmet. So we went through, we prioritized them. We're taking another look at some of our larger facility expenses like roofs and air conditioning to really hone in on where those are going to be, some of your larger ticket items and things like that.
Well, I think that before we do any remodeling and adding on and things of that nature, that we need to take care of HVAC and roofs and all of those things that are going to run up our operating costs.
Yeah, and that's what we actually planning to do.
Yeah,
Talk about that.
that's where the emphasis has been in years prior. Anything that can extend the life of the facility is definitely given a higher priority.
The funding for Daytona North, we got beat up at the last commission hearing because the lady said, you're not doing anything out there. We're paying all this money, you're not doing
We're
anything.
spending way
But
more
this
than
is
they paid
significant.
us.
This is significant what we're going to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, we've identified that on here, a little over $1 million for projects.
Yeah.
When you look at the front foot assessment, and I know that I wasn't at the commission meeting, I was on vacation, but I do know that that's always been an issue with the Daytona North service area. That front foot assessment, I don't believe it's been increased since 92, 93.
Really?
So I think it's probably time that it needs to be evaluated and looked at, because if you look at what they're generating and the work being done, the expenditures far exceed what they're contributing.
Yeah.
So I think it would probably behoove us to look at that.
Yeah, because this lady's input was, we're paying all this money and you're not doing anything.
It's
But
really
we are
not
doing
wrong.
stuff out there.
Yeah,
Yes, I know.
yeah, we are. I mean, we are looking at that, but I think that, moving forward, we probably need to look at adjusting that.
Yeah.
There are some other things, Mike and I had talked to the Public Works manager about coming up with some different strategies, things that typically the way we're structured right now, when you have a new resident going in there to develop property out in Daytona North or anywhere in unincorporated Flagler, it's on the property owner to improve and put in the culvert, and then once the culvert's in, we're maintaining it. So forever.
Forever. Yeah.
So
On their property.
on their property, to give them access to the benefit of their property. And if we looked at what St. John's and what Volusia County were doing, and that is not on the county's obligation, it is on the property owner. So that's something we need to change, because if you look at some of those operating costs that's being absorbed by that department, it really should be on the property owner, and it shouldn't come out of the gas tax fund. So those are things that we're trying to change. There was an example that he shared with us yesterday, I believe it was down in the Reimer Ridge area, where you have a property owner who had put in a culvert
It had a concrete connection to the road, like an apron. They had gone over it with blacktop, with asphalt. Well, now it's failed. So now we're having to go in there at county expense and gas tax, not the general
Right.
property
But
tax.
to go fix it.
To go fix it. So now you have to cut out and replace with like. So now you're taking out this tie-in, this connection, replacing the culvert with concrete or asphalt. It's a huge expense, and it's
Sure.
not something that should be borne on the county's public works department. So there are things that we're looking at changing there. You know, another thing that we're looking at, they went out and contracted with a company to come out and do an evaluation of all of our existing roads, so that we can forecast future replacement costs and things like that, and come up with more of like an asset management department within Public Works that's primarily looking at all of the culverts, looking at the roads, whether it be dirt and ongoing maintenance, whether it's pavement and life cycle of pavement, signage, guardrails, and really looking at everything included in maintaining the roads throughout Flagler and the unincorporated, so.
Is this the project that's going to be identifying like a PCI, pavement condition index, and
Yes.
prioritize the rank them?
Yes. So moving forward, we are making some adjustments and changes
Okay.
there. But did we have any other questions on these, or? So that brings up our rolling stock. And what we have here is really, when we do the rolling stock replacement schedule, we're looking at the life expectancy and the anticipated use of the equipment. What you have here is really just what we're predicting for next fiscal year. We actually look at each piece of equipment over the life cycle, and typically we forecast 5 years. So what we're showing here is just what's anticipated for fiscal year 22. You're a little over $2 million here. Again, it's not all general fund. Some of these are enterprise, such as your public works. Some of your transportation equipment on here, we're showing it at the replacement cost. It is grant subsidized, where you may have a 10% match. Again, we're showing whatever the total cost is of those assets on here.
The amounts on here for the replacement costs are what we've been seeing in people's budgets right now. So
I
like,
just summarize here.
Yeah, I see the engineering ones.
Yeah, phase one right there.
27,620.
Exactly.
That's the same number.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's really a roll-up of all the different departments on what they anticipate getting in their capital plan for next year. And this equipment has been evaluated by our fleet manager. He looks at it. It's not just the estimated lifespan of the equipment. Some of these things, typically like our trucks, like maybe a 5 or 7 year replacement schedule. If it doesn't meet the life cycle, we're looking at mileage, we're looking at condition. There's other factors, not just, well, the piece of equipment's 5 years old or 10 years old, so let's replace it. There's a lot that goes into it, where they're looking at anticipated repairs, things like that, as they age out. And this is one of those things, and I don't know if John had mentioned it, I know we talked about it when we went over the financial strategic plan, is trying to come up with a better approach to funding the capital rolling stock, more or less like a pay-as-you-go type program, where we would create an internal fund to support this moving forward, because this is one of the areas in the general fund where it's competing with those general fund dollars as far as CIP or operating accounts, where we would basically take a piece of equipment and each department, so like, say John had a truck and that truck we knew would last 7 years, every year he would pay into that fund 1/7 of
Sure.
that replacement cost. So at the end of the 7 years, there would be money in the fund to pay for that replacement. We're not having to go compete against some of these other dollars. So that's something that we're looking at
Better
doing
planning,
moving forward, better planning of some of those anticipated expenses, so. That is something that we're looking at.
The danger there is with accumulating those funds and then robbing them.
Yes. For a good cause, not robbing, for a good cause.
I would be.
Yes,
Kind of like we did with the Sadowski fund.
Yeah, exactly.
yes,
Exactly. Just-
very
well, we're gonna
similar to
sweep that one
affordable
up.
housing.
You're not gonna need that.
The thought was it would stay in the fund anticipated for that purpose, but,
I like that.
that's something that we're looking at, and I know in some of the funds that are probably a little bit tighter, some of your enterprise funds, I'll use Public Works. I do have a priority listing of Public Works if they're not able to fulfill all of their requests for replacement. We do have a priority listing of those, so we can take a look at that. And make sure
The gas
that we're
tax.
out of the gas tax so that we're able to afford what we're trying to do.
We're done for the moment, right?
That's
This is
it.
the last one. You have anything else?
I think that's it. No, nobody has any questions.
Good job, Bobby.
Yeah, thank you.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks.
All right, so
Mike.
we're
Glad to be here. That's our quiet mic with me again.
Yeah.
gonna break until 1 o'clock.
That's a tough budget.